Okay, hello, folks, and I'd like to introduce you to Scotty Scoggins, a candidate in Covington's West Ward, Post 2. Scotty's running to fill the seat that was filled by four-term council member Hawnethia Williams, who has decided not to run again. So Scotty's on the ballot this November, and as with every other candidate in a contested race in Covington, we've invited Scotty here to just answer some questions we have of him about some of the issues that are important to sustainable Newton and the folks who follow and support us. But Scotty, before we jump into that, I'll just give you a few minutes to introduce yourself to folks and kind of highlight what you believe you would bring to the role of city council.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a great opportunity because these are important things to me as well. My name is Scotty Scoggins. I'm a native Atlantan, born and raised in Chamblee, Georgia. Lived in Lawrenceville for a long time, and I moved to Covington about 3 years ago to help with my in-laws who are elderly, and they can live on their own, but they can't really drive around. So we kind of moved. We didn't want to move them from their community and church, so we moved out here to be with them. So I've been here for 3 years. I'm also the HOA president of Clark's Grove subdivision off Clark Street, and I decided to run originally because I was interested in Clark Street and helping the people on Clark Street. As I run around the city, I run and walk, use the trails, and I would run down there and I'd see things that I wanted to fix, and I thought this might be a great way to do it. And then since then, I've learned a lot, and something I think is of value for this audience potentially is I'm an accountant by degree. I did that for 10 years, and I've been in financial services, product management for the last 25 years. So it's about 35 years of financial services experience managing billion-dollar budgets and creating giant business cases. So I will be the only person on the city council with that kind of background. I can assure you, after looking at the background, nothing against military experience, educators, public service, all great stuff. But I think I can add some diversity to the board in the council in two ways. One is that financial background, and the other is that we a lot of people in the West Ward don't feel represented. I live in Clark's Grove, and I've been around the town, and many people here don't feel like they're represented. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, rich or poor, business owner, non-business owner, they don't feel represented. So I'll add that piece to the board. I think someone who's an outsider, just moved here, because a lot of the board is born and raised here. So I know I rambled on, but
no, okay, well, great. Well, thanks for giving us that introduction. As you know, our questions really are in this area of sustainability, climate, and some related matters. So off the top, I know, when we watch the news, we see a lot about wildfires, floods, heat waves, major hurricanes. Scientists tell us that the frequency and the intensity of these is increasing, and that it is linked to human-caused climate change from carbon emissions. So just to start, for you, to what extent are you personally concerned about impacts we see today from climate change and future risks that may occur?
Well, I've been concerned about environmental things my whole life. Now, I may have a different approach to things, but I do believe that climates change over time. I don't think that's also science. I do believe that human activity has done a lot to make that worse. And so nobody likes to see plastic floating around in the ocean. No one likes to see trash on the streets, even simple things like that. So I do think that there is a challenge in front of us to balance how do we remove some of these dangerous chemicals from our society and not destroy people's lives, to be honest with you. So I believe it's a problem. It's a complicated problem.
And in that vein, so you're running as a city councilman. What role do you think city government should play in responding to, mitigating, or helping avoid impacts from climate change?
Well, I think you start as I'm a big proponent of individual responsibility. You can't have freedom without individual responsibility, and that requires a moral compass. And as a person of faith, I believe that we are given dominion over the world as humans, and we should take care of that. So that comes from my faith background, is that we owe that. And I think that you have to set an example. You can't just tell people what to do. And that's my frustration with government in general. You can't just tell people what to do and then do something different. You have to set the example and be what you want them to be. Little tiny things like, recycling. I know a lot of people don't do that. I do. Throwing trash out of the window, that bothers me. Little things like that. Figuring out ways to remove the car congestion from the city square, utilizing the trails more. I volunteer with Newton Trails. We've adopted a part of the trail, Cricket Frog, here in our neighborhood, because it's important. And when we connect people and they can get from one place to another on a bike or walk, that makes your city much more livable. So I think that's where I lean, is being an example and encouraging people to do the right things.
Okay. We sent you in the information to prepare for this. And again, like every other candidate, we sent along our questions, but we also mentioned and sent you references to the Drawdown Georgia project, the Drawdown Georgia Climate Action Framework with developed by our universities here in Georgia. And, those folks have come up with 20 climate solutions broken down into electricity, transportation, buildings and materials, food and agriculture, and land sinks. And so among those 20, we were just interested to hear which ones you see as the best opportunities for us to do something here locally in Covington and Newton County.
Well, it was very interesting because I was not familiar with Drawdown Georgia. So thank you for sending me that. I spent, 5 or 6 hours over the last week or so digging through all that stuff. Like I told you before we started the recording, I listen well. I read a lot. I'm not a big fan of major news networks because you just get junk on either side. So I read a lot. And so this was good information. What I found interesting is none of this stuff is new. These 20 items have been around as long as I can remember, at least in some way, shape, or form. And there's a lot of things we can do here in the city for this. I'm a proponent of livable cities, and a lot of these things are just livable cities, having the ability to walk around, trying to reduce the amount of cars on the road. I think those are all things we are more geared as a city to do those things than the federal government. I'm not a big fan of federal regulations because I believe government is best done when it's closer to the people they impact. And giant mandates that impact 350 million people, one size doesn't fit all. And so I think the city is more capable of doing that than any government level. But specifically, there's things we can do. We encourage recycling. One of the things I really like about here is they'll take all the recycling you put out here. But if your trash can won't close, they don't take it. I think it's a good thing. It's a good way to encourage people to recycle. I noticed someone the other day using boxed water instead of plastic bottled water. I'm going to start doing that. I had never dawned on me that there was boxed water. We can connect the trails. I know the city's invested in the trails. We should continue to invest in the trails. We should figure out, I don't know what the answer is for the traffic congestion on the square. There's just so many people that visit here. So I'll be honest with you, I don't know what the solution is to get people off the square. But solar is a good example. One of the things that I know is later on down in your topics is solar. I think solar is great, but a lot of HOAs won't allow solar panels, especially older ones, because their covenants haven't been updated. I know the city charges, the way they charge and buyback programs for solar. Had spoken with people about that earlier. Our pool here, our clubhouse, we don't have a clubhouse, but our pool area is totally powered by solar. Already. It's got a series of solar panels. So there's things we can do there. I do like seeing the electric golf carts. So there's a lot of things we can do. I don't want to go through every one of these, but it looks like we're doing, as a city, many of these things already to some degree, which is good to see.
Right. And you kind of, I mean, you set the stage for moving on to the next topic, which really is in the space around electricity, because in addition to being a local government, Covington is a utility company.
Mhm.
Electricity, gas, water, of course. But in that electric role, you know, as a council member, if elected, you know, you're in a position where you're not just representing the citizens, but you're also representing the business interest of that utility. And sometimes you're asked to make decisions that require you to weigh those interests. And so we had a couple of questions on some, you know, specifics that just to get some idea of how you would approach this, and not so much to have a full technical grasp, and even though you have a financial background, to understand all of the financial implications, but just how would you approach these situations? Because I think, as you mentioned, some of them have already, you know, you've already looked into some of these. So climate solutions like rooftop solar, cogeneration, where a business generates electricity off of their industrial operations, or energy efficiency improvements. These are all part of that Drawdown Georgia framework of solutions, and yet they reduce household and industrial demand for electricity. And our city relies on electricity revenues to fund some city services. So do you think, or I guess I've asked, do you think we can balance those interests? And as a council member, how would you approach trying to balance them?
Yeah, so I am an and person. I'm not an or person. Very much an and person. I don't like or people. I would just be straight up. There's very few things that are this or that. Most everything is this and that. And in my job as a product manager, I have to balance. I worked at Turner Broadcasting, Bell South, the Home Depot, SunTrust. So in those roles, I've had to balance the needs of our customers with making those entities money. That's a daily thing for me, and it can be done. You just have to be smart about it, and you need to understand the complexities of these things. And that's what I think I can bring, number one, because I deal with this literally every day, these types of trade-offs. That said, the city, I've looked at the budget. I don't know much about the electric. I couldn't find the revenues generations, but I have gone through the whole city budget. I don't know how much of that $142 million budget is generated from the utilities, or if there's a separate budget. I was unable to find that. But if that's a single source of revenue that's so big, they're going to figure out a way to change that. if you know, I don't know what else to tell you. There's got to be a way to solve that problem. I know tourism is a big budget line item, I'm sure, not directly generating revenue for the city itself, but it does generate revenue in and around the city. So just have to figure out a way to shift that. I don't, you know, maybe there's a way to generate revenue from, because I know we're buying. The city is buying energy from other people that are getting it from solar and maybe even nuclear power. Why can't we? Maybe we can do that. I don't know. I don't know enough about how the city generates the power income to answer that, but there's got to be a way to do it.
Okay. And you mentioned buying power, and in fact, buying solar power. So just recently, in the last couple of months, Covington voted to purchase 15 megawatts of solar from Electric Association of Georgia, or MEAG, who is our power provider. This is MEAG's first solar project, and I think the whole thing was 80-90 megawatts, and we signed up for 15. We got 12.8. So I guess my question would just be, do you believe the city should do more of that when the opportunity presents itself, and would that be something you would support?
Yeah, like I said, I'm a fan of those things. As a free market person, who most Americans are, I believe the market is the best way to solve problems. Government typically doesn't solve problems. In my opinion, they exacerbate them to a large degree. But if you can get a good balance between public and private, I think you can do that. So yes, I think that there's a way to generate revenue for ourselves and to purchase clean energy, whether it's solar or not. There's got to be a way to purchase clean energy. Nobody that I know of wants dirty air, climate change. Nobody wants that. We just have different approaches to solving it. And I think it's really oversimplistic and in some cases ignorant of people to just demand that the government make things happen. Generally doesn't work. We all know that, but we keep trying to do it. Got to be more creative.
Yeah. So, and just as that 15 megawatt project reflects, Georgia actually has, and we see that when we drive around the countryside here, right? I mean, Georgia is a top 10 state for utility scale solar. So these big solar farms that we see across the landscape, we're one of the big main states for that. At the same time, we significantly lag other southern states in rooftop solar adoption, and industry experts often point to state and local policies that can get in the way of rooftop solar. And so we were going to ask about a few of these. Some we've run into here already, others we haven't even gotten to yet, but will. So the first one I think you mentioned earlier, kind of pointed to it in some of your comments, but that is the standby capacity fee that many of the MEAG cities, municipal electric corporations that buy and sell power, had put in place, that basically as a customer installs rooftop solar and goes to some distributed generation of power on their own property, there are fixed fees that get charged. And so in the case of Covington, we worked with the city council in 2019, got that reduced for residential property. It's still in full force for commercial and industrial. And so back to that earlier question about how do we balance these things, would you be supportive of continuing to explore ways to make that fee less of a impact to the return on investment for homeowners and small business owners trying to install solar?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you also have to go look at covenants and homeowning communities, right?
Yeah, right.
So I don't want to forget about that, because I know my last neighborhood before I moved here, there were very strict restrictions on having solar panels on your roof, anywhere that they could be seen from the street, which made it impossible to install. That's number one. So I think you need to look at, again, that's what I'm talking about, going to the individuals in each neighborhood, maybe even around here, to do that. But the city should support that. And again, I'm speaking from a little bit of ignorance of the revenue generating stream for the city. So if I was to win the seat, I'll learn a lot, right? I'll see things that we don't get to see as just, just citizens living here. But yes, I fully support that. I've spoken to people about that here in our own neighborhood as well. But on the other side of that, I do know that solar panels are not cheap. And, and if you're not middle class person, you're not going to get solar panels unless someone gives them to you, or because as an accountant, when you give tax credits to people who don't pay taxes because their income's so low, that doesn't help them at all, right? So you got to be, again, more creative with how we roll things out. And it needs to be much more local than it has been, in my opinion, much more one-on-one, much more community to community, rather than these big, giant things that look good on paper and make people feel good about themselves, but don't actually solve the problem.
So another related area, something called net metering. And just to quickly explain for folks watching that, Covington's like most utilities in the state of Georgia and other places, in that when I put solar on my rooftop and start generating electricity, there'll be days when I generate more electricity than I can use. And that goes back into the grid for other people to use. Other days I don't, and at night I don't generate electricity, so I buy it from the city. Under the current setup in our rate structure and many other utilities, I buy electricity from the city at retail rates, 11 to 12 cents a kilowatt hour. I sell it back at wholesale rates, so roughly 3 cents a kilowatt. So one of the things that makes my, back to your point of who can afford solar, one of the things that helps it pay for itself sooner is when I can buy and sell that electricity at the same price. So some states require net metering of their utilities. Georgia does not, but the Georgia Public Service Commission negotiated with Georgia Power a couple of years ago when Georgia Power put a pilot program in place to do that net metering, basically just, treat it the same both ways. When we're done, if I use more, I pay for it. If I use less, you pay me. So recognizing the financial considerations that need to be worked through in general, would that be an area that you would be willing to explore on the council and find out, how to try to make that, possible and fair for everybody?
Yeah, because that just makes sense, right? It makes common sense. So again, those, in my opinion, what you're talking about are market-driven solutions, right? The city is the municipality is supporting the market by making it more beneficial to have the solar panels than not, right? And that's how you make change, right? That you make change by incenting people to do things you want them to do rather than demanding that they do things you want them to do. So I think that's a great example of incenting those of us that would put solar panels on our house if we could, to do so. As a matter of fact, I don't know why you can't make money on it. I know in my nephew in Texas actually installs solar panels. They're actually shingles. Yeah. That's what he does, and they can make money on their home.
In the right market, you can. When the policies allow that, I mean, you can. Right. So, and related to this, and sort of a little bit further down the road, probably for our city, but it's being done now with, again, Georgia Power and some of the MCs, and that is, most utilities really have an incentive to encourage people to generate their own electricity during the daytime, because that's when they've got so much demand from industrial, all the plants around here, all the businesses that are lit up and doing commerce during the day. And then at night, they have extra capacity. They don't mind so much if I use it here in my home. So time of use rate plan is a way of saying to people, and this is really good for people who put in solar, because I can generate my electricity during the day. I don't have to get it from you. And then also people who have electric vehicles, because, I'm driving my car during the day. At night, I want to charge it up. So Georgia Power has a rate plan, that basically, if I happen to use electricity during the day, I'm going to pay a lot for it, a lot more than I would under my current normal rate plan. But at night, I can get electricity very cheaply. And so what that does is it, people that have installed solar systems through our Solarize program, as an example, who happen to have Georgia Power as their provider, they could switch rate plans, and then they just know, don't dry clothes during the day. Don't do electricity intensive activities, but that really accelerated their payback on their system. So what would have been maybe 8 years return on investment is now 6. So it's real important. So, this is an area, again, that would require some investment, I imagine, in systems at the city to do this. But would this be an area that you would also try to work with the electric department to see how we might do this?
Yeah, see, that's what you're talking about is the libertarian in me is going to come out now.
I knew I could get it out.
So I'm a pay for use kind of person. So that fits right into that model. And I'm trying not to get too complex into my view of how local government and citizens work together in the community. There shouldn't be a difference. And I'm going to say this really quickly, and I know it'll spawn some questions, but in my mind, at the local level, the community is all one entity. So wherever the revenue is being generated and wherever the expense is being generated, whether it's the government, businesses, individuals in the community, it's all one pot, right? And we shouldn't get so hung up around who is getting which piece of the pot. Now, I know we have to, it's complicated, but as a community, we should all be working together, and that's public, private, communities, citizens, everybody working together. So, for example, I'm a big fan of toll roads. I know that bothers people, but if I'm driving and I'm paying, I go to Disney World 2 or 3 times a year. I have no problem paying the toll on the road to get to Disney World, because I'm driving on the road. I'm the one using it. This is where I disagree with some of my more conservative friends. I know that in some Northwestern states, they're starting to use GPS to charge people for driving. See, I like that. If I'm driving, I should be paying for the roads. So anyway, so yeah, I think it's a great idea to charge me more if I decide to wash my clothes, dry my clothes, and do 100 other things during the day. Then yeah, no problem with that at all.
Okay.
I know it's complicated though. So
well, sure. And so switching just a little bit, the other thing that we've had some progress here locally is in the electric vehicle space. The city recently, earlier this year, put a no charge, publicly available charging station at the Welcome Center. The city plans to install additional charging stations at other points in town, and the city is actually we did a project with Georgia Tech a couple of years ago to look at the city's fleet and recommend places where they could electrify that fleet. So the city's taken the first step this year with 3 vehicles in the budget that will be electric vehicles. Obviously, from our perspective, we're after the carbon reduction that comes with shifting from internal combustion to electric vehicles, but the city also, as the study showed, can save a lot of money on fuel, but also maintenance on those vehicles. So do you support those kind of efforts, and would you continue to be a champion for the city electrifying the fleet and encouraging public adoption?
Yeah, I do. And again, this is a financial decision. I know people look at it as not, but if the city here's an example back to one of your previous questions. If the city loses revenue because people are not using as much power, but they're saving money because people are using less power, right? Then you've kind of offset that, right? That's the financial background that I bring is you people always look at revenue generation in government programs. Very few people look at how to reduce the cost of running the government, and that's a great way to reduce the cost of running the government. And so I'm a huge fan of that. I also, and again, I tend to be a dreamer. Walt Disney is one of my favorite people. If you can dream it, you can do it. I love having golf carts in and around the community, but there needs to be, not needs to be, I would like to see parking for just golf carts. And also space that they can ride on that's not dangerous, like coming down Clark Street. On a golf cart is quite harrowing at times. Now, I don't have one, but I see them and I'm behind them. So I think there's a lot of things the city can do to encourage usage like that. I do like having the electric. I see them over by the Welcome Center. Like I said, I run by there all the time. My only problem with electric vehicles right now is, for me, they don't go far enough, because when I have to drive into work at the Home Depot, that's 30 miles there and back. And when I travel, I can go 200 miles at a time. So the more spaces that we can enable to charge those vehicles, the better. I noticed in one of the drawdown things, this road that has solar built into the road, and I believe there are plans to build cars that charge as they're driving past some of those things. That's all really innovative and creative stuff that again, market a good private public partnership can, I think, really straighten out. Long-winded answer to say yes.
No, good. Okay. And then, so we've zoomed in on a few specifics, but just as we conclude, to zoom back out, I'd say, from our perspective, Sustainable Newton, our motto is we believe in a world where people and planet are as important as profit, and where future generations matter. So as you think about a sustainable Covington, what does that look like for you?
Gosh, that's a big, complex question. I go back to us being a community and not a government and the people, if that makes sense. We're a community. The local city government, we all live here. We all live together. One of the things that I've noticed when I walk through some of the neighborhoods that were surprised that I was in their neighborhood, walking door to door, I would say, "Hey, I'm your neighbor. I live a quarter mile from you. We should talk more," right?
Yep.
so that's how I'm opening the door to people. And that's what we need to do. We need to get out and talk to people, because Sustainable Newton, I didn't even know it existed until you sent me this stuff. We should know this exists, right? This is at the risk, again, I'm very transparent. I learned so much from the documents that you sent to me. I think we should educate more people, because then this isn't a conservative or liberal or libertarian concept. They can all thrive together. Remember my "and" thing. There are a lot of common solutions that everybody would agree with. And we just need to educate people on those. Recycling. I remember when I'm old enough to remember when that became a thing and everybody pushed back against it. I don't want to separate my trash. Well, now it's just a thing. It's what people do.
Yep.
So I'm fully supportive, but I think we need to do more educating of maybe even the city council itself. I don't know how involved they are. Yep. I do know the builder of my neighborhood is very active in these programs, and I've learned a lot from him. So again, I think it's educating, talking to people individually, making it a priority, and convincing people of the benefits of why you're doing this. You know what the number one complaint is from the people on the square? Traffic. Yeah. Well, reducing the amount of traffic on the square will reduce the amount of traffic on the square and reduce carbon by getting the cars off the square. So anyway, there's a lot of very specific things, because this is of interest to me. You may know, I recognize that I have a lot of opinions on this because it matters. It's a big deal. I could talk about it all day, but I won't, because I know you got to go too.
Well, and we would love to talk about it all day, but I know I kind of made some commitments to you up front about the time we would need. And, I know, like most people, you have a day job and you're campaigning. So we really appreciate you taking time out from both of those to join us here. And we look forward to sharing what you've shared with us, with our membership, with our followers, with our supporters. One thing I'll put up at the end, but you can tell people now, where do people go if they want to know more about you, your campaign, and what you're trying to bring to the city?
I do have a website, electscottyscoggins.com, and I'm on Facebook at elect Scotty Scoggins as well. Have email address electscottyscoggins@gmail.com. So I put a lot of posts out there. I'm a frequent social media user. That's how you get to young people these days. And so I also have Instagram, I have Twitter, I have TikTok. So, but yeah, whether I win this or not, I'd like to be involved with what you're doing there. These are things I didn't even know, really, like I said, didn't really know was an option for getting involved in the city and the county. So I'd love to be involved one way or the other.
Well, we love having you. We appreciate your interest in the city and in what we're doing, and wish you well. And
Sure.
Again, thanks for the time.
Thank you.